Welcome to Potter Revisited, episode 84. I'm Tori.
And I'm Shay.
Today we are covering chapter 24 of Goblet of Fire, Rita Skeeter's Scoop.
And it's not a scoop of ice cream, although I wish it were. It's not that at all. What it is, in fact, is hearsay and slander, which is what we will be calling this episode.
We ended last episode off with the Yule Ball, and now, just like in current times, Christmas is over, and it is that weird time in between the Christmas holidays where everyone's just being very quiet and kind of hibernating.
Us right now. That's why we procrastinated this episode. It wasn't because we are lazy and we wanted to eat chocolate and hide. No, it's because we wanted you to be where we are in this chapter and in real life. You're welcome.
So we get a tidbit that Hermione tells Harry that she used very liberal amounts of SleekEasy's hair potion and to make her hair all nice for the Yule Ball, but it's too much fuss to do every day. And it's funny because I remember it being revealed, I think early Pottermore days, that Harry's grandfather was the inventor of SleekEasy's.
Yeah, that's where the Potter wealth comes from. His inheritance is she's keeping his family in business. She's helping build up that bank vault of money for Harry, you know? I respect it. But also, as a fellow frizzy girl, I can absolutely relate to Hermione. Defrizzing is so much effort, and to do that daily, that's like a special event type situation for me, you know? You'll get what you get most of the time.
I'm someone that's pretty long, wavy hair as well, and I can't be bothered to do my hair most of the time. So yeah, it's definitely a special event kind of thing.
She has more important things to do, like save the world.
Yeah, exactly. But Harry and Ron catch Hermione up on the news about Hagrid being a half giant, and Hermione is just so unshocked. She's like, yeah, well, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, she probably figured it out, you know? She's like, well, he's kind of large, so I guess that checks out.
She's like, oh, that makes sense.
And not having the weird societal stereotypes of oh no, giants can't be in wizard society. She's like, oh, that makes sense. I mean, apparently Fleur's part Vila, Hagrid's part giant. It's just the way these things are. Lupin's a werewolf. Just another day at Hogwarts.
To Hermione, it's just oh, that's just prejudice and stuff. I mean, giants can't be all bad. Hagrid's nice. And Ron's just here these guys just don't get it.
But it's also funny because it's not like Ron has personal experience running into giants yet. You know what I mean? He's like, no, they're bad. Trust me, guys, I know. And sometimes in the wizarding world, he is correct and he does know. No Harry hearing voices. Kind of weird. But in this case, he doesn't really know. He's heard stories, but they're probably big fish stories. You're not actually sure if it really happened.
Yeah, exactly.
Hermione might be more in the right because she's not absorbing everything she's told and assuming it's all accurate. She's thinking it through, bless her heart.
So we have Hermione and Ron acting very, cordially to each other. And they didn't have this huge, big fight at the end of last chapter. And it's just funny seeing them having this unspoken truth because Ron obviously thinks Hermione's crazy, thinking that Hagrid being a half giant isn't a big deal. And he's not saying this to her. He's just keeping it to himself. So they're kind of tiptoeing around each other, but they're not quite it's kind of unspoken where they're being kind of overly polite to each other and not acting like the normal selves. And it's just kind of I wonder if they had a conversation without Harry around. Or if it's just very unspoken, we're pretending that fight never happened.
When you're freshly over a fight with someone, you're still afraid you might hit a nerve if you sort of play around with them too much, if you cross any lines. So you're sort of more aware of where the line is that normally you sort of walk with being funny versus being serious versus being overly empathetic. And so you're giving them extra room just in case they're a little more sensitive. I feel like I get that way after fights with people too. I'm more cautious, less funny. I'm not going to jokingly make fun of them or anything. If we've been in a fight recently, I'm keeping it all very, very straightforward, nice until we've softened up to each other again. And then I'm okay, now I can go back to making terrible puns about them or whatever.
They definitely get back to it, but it's just interesting seeing this post fight, especially because the fight they revealed these big feelings and stuff that were maybe a bit too raw and real for the age they are at now. And so it's let's just go back into our boxes and let's figure out how to move forward from this. And Hermione and Ron obviously have terrible communication problems in their relationship, not just in this book, in the entire series with each other. So it's just very much, I can see them just like being like, you know what? We're not going to talk about this.
To be fair, none of them are the strongest communicators with any of each other and themselves. Like, the lack of communication skills, the lack of self-awareness at times. It's kind of like a game of broken telephone every time they're trying to get a point across with each other.
Yeah. All their problems could be solved if they just, spoke to each other, but,
No, that wouldn't make any sense.
So we have procrastination Harry back at it because he realizes that February, when the second task is a lot closer now that he's over, the Christmas holidays.
Wow, time continues to pass.
So he finally has consequences for his actions because he has not done anything with the egg.
Hasn't even really thought about it.
And Harry is just so petty. He does not want to take Cedric's advice just because Cedric so happens to be dating Cho now.
Yeah.
And he's like, that guy, I wouldn't trust him. He's so stupid walking around with Cho, holding her hand.
Disgusting. I also think Harry doesn't want Cedric's hint to be correct.
Yes.
It's not just that he doesn't trust Cedric's right. It's that he'll be angry if Cedric's right because then Cedric helped him and you want to have an easier black and white thinking about someone you want to dislike.
Cedric doesn't make it easy to hate him because he's such a good, nice guy.
Because he's not a jerk. He's just a swell dude. So it's I really want to hate you.
So Harry just has to find reasons.
Yeah, he wants to hate him, so he doesn't want to find out if Cedric told the truth, because if he did, it's harder to hate Cedric.
Yeah, but Harry's really stressing about the egg, and he's trying to do some stuff with it, but it's just not working out. But he really doesn't want to use Cedric's hint, because he's like, I'll just do it myself. Doesn't want to give Cedric even though Cedric doesn't even he's trying to be a nice guy, being like, hey, Harry, you helped me out. I'll help you out.
In the honor of fair sport, fair play, gentlemanly, he's being swell and Harry's being petty. I mean, fine though.
But Harry wants to keep Cedric's hint as the last resort.
If all else fails, I will accept help from Cedric Diggory. But before then, I will do absolutely everything else.
I'm kind of going into the meat as the chapter is that we go to Care Magical Creatures when the term starts up again, and Hagrid is not teaching the class, and we are introduced to Grubbly-Plank.
It's a great name. It's a really well thought out, beautiful name. It means something, I'm sure.
But she is taking over, or I guess covering for Care Magical Creatures, and has told Harry that Hagrid is indisposed. And I just think she must be so weirded out why some random student keeps asking, where his professor is.
Because he doesn't know that they're besties.
Yeah. Kind of pointing out the weird Harry-Hagrid relationship here, kind of crossing boundaries.
It does kind of remind me of being a kid in primary school, though, because if your teacher was away sick, you were always asking the supply teacher, what happened to our teacher? And whispering, oh, maybe they were in a terrible accident. Or oh, maybe they don't teach her anymore. Maybe they got fired. And it's the teacher had a cold or had to go get their tires changed, normal, boring stuff. But you make up all these rumors and get hyped about it because you're a child and you need the excitement in your life. Also, as I sit here thinking about Grubbly-Plank, Plank makes me think Walk the Plank, which is pirates. And I remember early in the series, they say Grubbly-Plank retired to spend time with their remaining limbs. So now I'm picturing Grubbly-Plank as having a lot of missing limbs and having a wooden leg like a pirate. And that's part of the Grubbly-Plank. It gives you the vibe of missing limbs, hook hand, peg leg, Grubbly-Plank.
But she definitely knows what she's talking about.
She knows something, at least.
But Malfoy comes up after Grubbly-Plank leaves Harry, kind of concerned about Hagrid. And of course, he just happens to have this newspaper in his pocket. And I can just imagine Malfoy getting this newspaper, seeing this, and being like, I am going to cut this out, I'm going to put it in my pocket, and I'm going to show Potter later, and I'm going to rub it in his face.
Yep, such is the way of Draco frickin' Malfoy.
Lives and breathes Harry Potter.
I could so see him in the modern day and age as a high school kid pulling up his phone and showing people Twitter, being like, look what's trending on Twitter. Hashtag Harry sucks. Trending. Look what's trending on Twitter.
Hashtag Harry's over party.
Hashtag Harry's over party. Snake emoji, snake emoji.
The newspaper is an article from Rita Skeeter that is the interview Hagrid gave, although it's not really, the interview Hagrid gave.
It's not at all that in any way, shape, or form. It is let's just say it. Rita Skeeter is just begging for a lawsuit. Every word is either defamation of character, hearsay, or slander.
The article obviously exaggerates, reveals Hagrid being a half giant, which begs the question, how does she know this? And how did she find out? And she also has interviews with the Slytherins about him as a teacher, which, how did she get those interviews? But the main part of the article is that it reveals he's a half giant and kind of paints him as this, vicious, ferocious, terrible, mean teacher who scares the students and causes them harm. And I feel like as a kid, like, this is just the opposite of Hagrid. Hagrid's like the most warm and gentle character in the series. But honestly, reading this as an adult, I forgot how just like gross and kind of like it's so like racist and prejudice. It keeps painting like Hagrid, who is the complete opposite of these things that she's saying, as this thing just because he happens to be of this, like, that he happens to be this. And it's just like we can relate to stuff like that when media kind of fearmongers about a certain like marginalized group.
It's so easy to find a group of people to turn into other, just to sort of flame unjustified hatred and anger, and like people do it so often to form a sense of camaraderie amongst groups. Like if we all can hate on this one other together, we're all on the same team. And it's I don't love it. It's gross. It's grimy. And Rita Skeeter is a perfect example of that. She just wants to start shit.
Yeah, the thing is, like, Rita this isn't even like her trying to, like, having beef with Hagrid and wanting to, like, cause him harm. He's just some random guy that she's like, you know what? This could be a story.
And it's like, there are parts of the article that are almost fair. Like, to me, it is fair to question a teacher's ability if they haven't graduated school, like especially if they never graduated the grade they're teaching. It makes sense to question that, unless they're exceptionally, like without the schooling, they proved themselves exceptional in that area of study outside of academia, then that makes sense. But I can understand being like, how are you teaching my kid care of magical creatures when they're seventh year, when you didn't complete seventh year care of magical creatures? Like, I can understand that being questioned and asking to see credentials and to understand how they're qualified. That's sort of fair to me. But the racism or the speciesism is completely unacceptable.
Yeah. My biggest question is, how did she not get sued for slander for like any of this? And there's more coming, and it's just like, I don't know if it didn't age well or something, but I just feel like they love to sue in the UK, don't they? The tabloids say shit all the time.
It's very British, too, the type of tabloid journalism. Like, everywhere has shitty tabloid journalism, but I think when these books came out,
oh yes,
the particular type of tabloid journalism is very British.
Yeah.
And I think now with Twitter being news for some people, it's becoming a lot more popular to have random made-up stories being passed around as if they are truth. But it was always sort of more so a thing in the UK. They had to make those special laws for the royal family and stuff to protect the children and all that. So, like, I can feel how British she is in the way that she does this.
But of course, Hagrid obviously has not shown up because of this article. He's all embarrassed and upset. And I do agree that we do love Hagrid as a character, but it is nice for the kids to get a proper lesson as Grubbly-Plank is teaching them about unicorns, and it actually feels like a proper thought-out lesson plan. And the Gryffindors are kind of remarking after this, Parvati especially, that like they really liked having a lesson, and Parvati even says that this is what she thought care of magical creatures would be like, not what Hagrid has been teaching them for the last 2 years. And Harry, is super upset because of Hagrid, and he's just kind of yelling at everyone, being like, what about Hagrid? What about Hagrid? And Parvati's just like, so cold with Harry because obviously he was the worst date ever. And she's just like, well, he can stay and be the great gameskeeper, right?
To be fair, it's not like Hagrid seems to be teaching them about creatures that they need to know about. Like, it kind of feels like you should be learning about some of the very common creatures that wizards take care of, and then maybe some of the more dangerous ones that it's important to know how to survive being around. Making up and inventing a creature and teaching them to take care of it does not seem like it's actually teaching them anything of value.
Yeah, Hagrid likes creatures, but he prefers to teach them about things that he thinks are cool. Because we see later on that he does know things about other creatures, but he just finds them boring.
Which I can understand. Like, I imagine a lot of teachers who have advanced study in a subject get bored teaching grade 7 math when they know advanced trigonometry. Like, I'm sure that can get boring. But to be a good teacher, you do have to take into account the skill level of your audience or your students, and also what is the most meaningful for them to learn.
Harry, Ron, and Hermione try to go see Hagrid, but he won't even open the door for them. He's kind of sequestered himself away. And so the next Hogsmeade weekend comes, and there's a funny moment where Hermione's like, oh, Harry, like, aren't you going to stay here and work on the egg? And Harry lies, and it's like, oh, I've already figured it out. Because he just wants to go to Hogsmeade.
Yeah, he's a liar.
Yeah, so we see Victor showing off his prowess in the cold water as they're walking to Hogsmeade. They see him jump off the ship into the lake. Could not be me.
I could do it. I love swimming in lakes, way more than pools.
I hate cold water.
Crumb must have solved the egg already, which means he's out there prepping his body for the task. And honestly, acclimatizing to the lake and getting familiar with it is smart.
I don't know why I never connected that, but that makes complete sense that, like, he would have the egg figured out, and that's why he's swimming in the water, to get used to the lake.
He's like, yeah, I'm going to have to go underwater. This is the closest body of water. Either way, I want to work on my swimming and how long I can stay underwater and start thinking about ways to stay underwater and what kind of creatures you see underwater. Like, he's doing the work.
And this is where Hermione kind of talks a bit about Crumb and kind of talks him up being like, you know, he's a really nice guy. Like, you wouldn't expect him to be from Durmstrang, but he is. And he's from the north, so this is probably really warm to him. And, you know, Ron's not saying anything because he's still in that kind of awkward territory with Hermione. But Harry remarks that he found a broken arm off a Crumb figurine under his bed.
Petty.
That probably happened at some point. And then Ron, all he brings up was that there's still a giant squid in the lake, and he sounds like he's pretty hopeful that it might get Crumb.
Wistful thinking.
So we love petty boys.
We do. We do.
Both Ron and Harry, just so petty.
They really are. They're having a special time. And it's so funny because they ruined their own dates. Like, I realized that's not who they wanted to go with.
No, they were the worst dates.
They were the problem. It was them. And now they're being so whiny about everything and so petty. And it's just like, again, your own faults. Entirely your own faults.
I imagine Hermione being quite confused because Ron kind of was like, he had like 5 different scenarios. He was telling her why he was mad about her going with Crumb, all which were lies. And she goes with him and she's just like, Ron really liked this guy before I went on this date with him. And she's trying to convince him like, oh, you know, he's actually really nice and he's a good guy and not bad like we think people from Durmstrang are. And Ron's just like, I hope he gets eaten by the giant squid. But into Hogsmeade, they are in the Three Broomsticks. And who happens to be there but Ludo Bagman? And like Hermione says, does he ever go to work? Who knows? He's also sitting with a bunch of goblins, which, knowing what we know about what happens to him at the end of the book, very interesting.
Yeah, we get quite a bit of Bagman being a slime ball. But also, I really love that gobbledygook is an actual language. Like, the goblin language is gobbledygook, and I'm like, that's cute.
This is where you would say that if this was a token book, they would actually have that as a language.
Yes, that is exactly what I would say. He would have developed the language. He would have developed the history of how the language fragmented off into sub-languages and how it developed over time. It would have a syntax. It would have conjugations.
Bagman uses Harry kind of as an excuse to get rid of the goblins, and he asks Harry to have like a private word, not in front of Ron and Hermione, which, you know, kind of red flag, because Bagman's been kind of given some weird energy about the Triwizard tasks to Harry. And we get the little tidbit that Mr. Crouch has been off sick and Percy's been filling in for him. And I had a lot to say about that, but shouldn't the Ministry like look into senior officials being away more closely? Like if a manager or like a supervisor, and Crouch is very senior in the Ministry. And so if he's not coming into work for a few days, would it, like, someone higher up in the department be like, oh, like, what's going on?
No, they don't notice.
They're just like, oh, he's mailing Percy instructions. That's fine. This is why the Ministry's in disarray.
Maybe he's a shitty boss, and they're happy that he's not there, so they're not questioning it.
Working in a corporate environment, I'm just like, this could never fly. There'd be, like, so many red flags if, like, he wasn't, like, reporting in and only talking to one person. But anyways, Percy loves power, so he's probably over the moon. So Bagman also offers, again, to help Harry with the task because, you know, he likes Harry and, you know, really wants Hogwarts to win. And then Harry brings up the fact like, oh, are you going to help Cedric too?
It's not at all biased.
And despite Harry being so petty about Cedric, he still brings Cedric up.
Honestly, I really love Harry being so honest and, like, respecting fair play and the innate importance of sport. You know, regardless of how petty he can be about personal stuff, he takes his games, his competitions, and his sports seriously, and he is very honorable.
I think we do see that Harry doesn't like getting special treatment, and I would think he kind of sees through Bagman a bit, and he doesn't like the idea of getting special treatment. And also, he's a good sportsman.
I also love that Ron suggests that maybe Percy's poisoning Crouch. I just think that's golden. I love that. I'm like, maybe he's not wrong, but either way, spot on, hilarious.
The Ministry just lets people fall through the cracks, apparently. Like, I know Percy gets blamed for part of this later on, but I mean, like, Percy's like an entry-level assistant at this point, and he's being told to do stuff by his boss. I mean, I'd probably do it too.
It's probably him. He's probably got his eyes on a promotion. He's like, I'm already doing more tasks than my job requires. He can see the empty chair and imagine himself sitting in it, you know? He's projecting to his future.
And then after Bagman, leaves very quickly, Rita Skeeter comes in, of course.
Well, when wouldn't she?
And, she's already talking about ways to ruin Ludo Bagman's life, and Harry's, like, pretty pissed off. And he kind of calls her out in front of the whole bar, like what's your deal, lady? Like, why are you a complete cow, basically?
Why are you a cow?
He calls her that later on. But she completely is, like, totally professional, like, oh, Harry, let's get a quote from you on a story. And it's so interesting how she talks to Harry as he's someone of note versus when Hermione stands up for Hagrid. She's very cold, detached. She's like, you don't know what you're talking about, missy.
Yeah, but Hermione fucks her up, so it's okay.
Yeah. Hermione basically calls her out as well, and Rita is just like, well, whatever. I know things about Bagman that would make your hair curl.
Hermione's like, bitch, my hair is already curly.
It's just interesting the way that she still kind of, like, pretends to be... Or I guess, like, she puts on this, like, facade for Harry as, like, this...
She pretends to be professional.
And with Hermione, it's, like, super detached, like, whatever.
She doesn't think Hermione's a story, so she doesn't think she's worth her time.
Sorry, it's not a person of note. Yeah.
Which is hilarious, because Hermione is actually super interesting. And Rita Skeeter is trash.
Yeah, Hermione is not afraid of Rita Skeeter, and Rita should actually be afraid of Hermione, because Hermione is, like, unhinged.
She is deranged, and I love that about Hermione. Like, because, like, what is Rita Skeeter gonna do to her, right? Like, it's not like Hermione has a big reputation. Most people don't know who she is, so if she writes an article about Hermione, they're like, okay, some girl at Hogwarts is whatever Rita Skeeter says. Her parents aren't gonna read it. The actual people who know her are gonna know it's not true. Her marks speak for themselves, so it's not like it's going to have too much of an impact on her future job prospects, which is 4 years from now because she's still a child, you know? Like, Rita Skeeter can't really touch her. So...
In her opinion, she's like, I don't care about what she writes about me, because Ron kind of was like, oh, you should be careful, like, see what she did to Hagrid and Harry before. Like, Hermione's like, I don't really have a reputation here, besides at school, and my parents aren't in the wizarding world, they don't read these papers. But also the fact that Rita shouldn't be writing about a minor in the first place. But Hermione's, really amped up right now because she's so mad at Rita Skeeter, and, Hermione is on a mission. So she decides, you know what, enough's enough. They're going to go see Hagrid, and they're going to go...
sort this shit out.
And yes, so Hermione goes up to Hagrid's door, and she starts yelling and knocking through it, yelling at Hagrid that they don't care about, like, who his mother was, they love him, and all these stuff, and she's just yelling and banging on it, and then Dumbledore opens the door, and I think it's such a great visual that Hermione's really angry and ramped up, and she's so, proper, usually with authority figures, especially the headmaster.
It's such an example of how she's very respectful of boundaries with certain people, and how their boundaries of Hagrid being in any way an authority have dissolved so entirely that she's yelling at him and scolding him and being loud and aggressive. And then Dumbledore, who's the polar opposite on the end of, like, the level of authority, and she just immediately is like...
She's so embarrassed. I just feel like if the films had covered this storyline, this would have been a great visual for it.
It would have been such a good visual.
Especially having Emma Watson. Like, I can just imagine, like, her face.
From angry to shocked to embarrassed. And then Dumbledore, but, like, being serious about it. Like, the serious face Dumbledore and then a slight smirk. It would have been so good.
Dumbledore's there, getting Hagrid back up and moving. Kind of.
Sort of. He's doing his best.
They come in with Dumbledore, and they're kind of, giving Hagrid a pep talk, which Hagrid, he's listening to it.
And I really appreciate that Dumbledore showed up for Hagrid, because we talk a lot of shit about Albus Dumbledore on this podcast, but he read the article, he understood what Hagrid was feeling, he understood it would impact him a lot, and he took his own ass down there to Hagrid's hut to sit down there and try and be a friend to him. And he doesn't do that for a lot of people that aren't Harry Potter. So it's nice to see him actually being what could be considered genuinely a friend to someone. Like it's comforting. And I also love the way in which Harry's sort of trying to level with Hagrid and like make Hagrid's problems seem less huge, I guess, and less giant, dare I say, by like saying, Harry Harry's telling him that his family's not perfect either, and that's what Dumbledore says as well, because neither of them come from perfect families, and it's kind of some foreshadowing of Aberforth on Dumbledore's part, because his brother's a bit of a not perfect.
Yeah, the Aberforth thing is very interesting. He said that Aberforth got in trouble for doing stuff with goats. What did he do?
Now, as an adult, you read that, and you think one specific thing that is horrible, and you're like, I don't know about that. But assuming it's a children's book, and assuming the author didn't want there to be that type of interpretation, hopefully. I mean, there's probably all kinds of transfiguration you should not be doing on goats. You know what I mean? Because they're living creatures.
I don't trust goats. I was attacked by a goat as a child. I don't trust them. It's definitely painting an interesting image of Aberforth, because Dumbledore also implies that Aberforth can't read.
Which I think might just be like the elitist, overly academic brother being a dick.
Reading it back made me think that Dumbledore was kind of being elitist in a way.
Aberforth didn't feel like reading The Hobbit, and Dumbledore read the Silmarillion, so he's looking down on him. I don't know how to speak that in Harry Potter.
But it's also really interesting that Hagrid actually compares himself and Harry and how they kind of grew up without, like, they lost their parents when they were really young. And Hogwarts kind of became a home for them. And it's really, like, really cemented, like, how Hagrid and Harry's relationship is kind of, like, a weird, undefined kind of area where they are friends, but also Hagrid's kind of, like, his adult and kind of a father figure in a way. But also, I think Harry and the trio in general are also kind of parental figures for Hagrid.
Weird levels of, like, authority and or, like, parentification? Is this parentification?
Maybe a bit.
Are the Golden Trio parenting Hagrid?
We have talked about how Hagrid's kind of stunted, like, I think emotionally, as he lost his parents really young, and then he was left school really young, and he's kind of been, I guess, kind of raised by Dumbledore, but I don't think Dumbledore's really parenting him.
I think in a lot of extents, like when someone loses family early and gets kicked out of school early and therefore like aren't around their peer group, there's two ways it can go. Either you're forced to mature quickly and you have to become an adult much faster than you should, or I think to some extent Hagrid didn't have to do that because Dumbledore stepped in certain areas. But Dumbledore maybe helped Hagrid in certain areas where he should have assisted Hagrid in taking care of himself, and he may have just done that for Hagrid. So I think Hagrid didn't end up developing those skills. And like, it's good that he didn't have to when he was really young, but when he started to become an adult, I think he should have been given a bit more space to try and like develop a bit more as an adult. And I don't think that space was given to him because, again, it's easier for him not to be fully self-sufficient because it makes it easier for Dumbledore to control him.
Hagrid, after this pep talk, he's kind of like, you know what? Like, I am who I am and I don't care. And he's just going to go back to work, and he's done with Madame Maxime, and he's like, whatever. So Hagrid's back.
I think the line is, I'll give her big bones, which, ew.
But he was telling Harry as, like, he's kind of coming back. He's like, you know what? Like, you can win this tournament, Harry. Like, it would make my day if you won this tournament. Show them all up that, like, you can do it. And he's asking him how he's doing for the next task, and Harry's lying through his teeth, being like, oh, I've got it all figured out, Hagrid, don't worry. And now Harry's kind of at the point where he's like, I got to figure out that egg because I can't let Hagrid down.
Go take a bath.
So he's finally told himself he's going to use Cedric's hint. He's going to take Cedric's hint because he can't let Hagrid down. That's, like, against his moral code. So we'll finally get a little look into the prefect's bathroom next chapter.
Which I love, as I'm a bath girl. I love a candle. I love a playlist or, like, an audiobook and some bubbles. I love that for myself.
But do you have any other remarks before we wrap up?
Do I have remarks? Rita Skeeter is a creative writer, and that is not journalism.
Yeah.
That's what I have to say. And Harry should sue her for everything she's worth.
Why isn't Harry just suing people left and right?
He's got time. He can hire a lawyer.
Yeah, the older I get, the more Rita Skeeter is just The absolute worst. The true villain of the series. And honestly, I gotta say, she deserves being put in a jar for a year, or however long Hermione kept her in a jar.
Honestly, it can only make her a better person.
I talk about how unhinged Hermione is, but that wasn't far enough. She could have done more.
Honestly, squish her.
Yeah. Would it be considered murder if she's a bug?
It would be murder if Hermione knew it was Rita Skeeter and not just a bug. So Hermione doing it, if it's provable that she knew, could go to jail for murder. But if she made it so Draco did it accidentally or some such, if anything, that's on the part of Rita Skeeter. And also, Rita Skeeter committed a crime by being a non-registered animagus. So
yeah, so how would they know?
If you die in animagus form, do you think you come back in your form to be a corpse, or do you stay in bug corpse?
Interesting. I don't know.
Please write in to the podcast. No one does. And tell us if you think an animagus died in their animal form, if they would return to their human form or remain a animal corpse.
Let us know what you think. But that's it for us for now. Thank you for listening, and we'll be back next time to discuss Chapter 25, The Egg and the Eye.
It's a weird title.
So we're finally getting a bit further into the plot of Goblet of Fire. And if you like this episode, please give us a like or a follow. You can follow us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And you can also follow us on social media at Pottery Visited. And we will see you next time.
Bye.